Living by yourself versus living with your parents is a really big switch. You're gonna have to take responsibility and be an adult about a lot of things. Not only is it a lifestyle switch, but you're going to have to sacrifice a lot of things that you were able to do before. What's up, you guys? It's your girl Alex Shaw, and you're watching my YouTube channel, Alex Can Do That. And today you probably clicked on this video because you're wondering, can I afford an apartment by myself? I have helped myself, a couple of friends, and a couple of family members look through their statements and basically just decide, can I afford an apartment, point blank period. So if you're around the age of 18, 19, 20, it is completely and utterly true that sometimes for us it is pretty difficult to continue to live with our parents. Now don't get me wrong, I know some people who can live with their parents 26, 27 up until their 30s and even more on than that. But I have run into a lot of friends and family members that say that living with their parents, once they become an adult, can make them sometimes feel depressed or even trapped, which is never good. People come to me and they tell me this, I tell them, I really think it's just time for you to move out, really. And then usually the next statement that they tell me is, I don't even know if I can afford to move out. So if you currently live with your parents and you don't have any bills, but you also don't have any savings at all, you probably shouldn't be watching this video, but also you should be watching this video more than anything because you're kind of financially irresponsible if you don't have any savings and you don't have any bills either. That's something you got to work on. But regardless, nobody ever really teaches us how to know if we can afford things. People just tell us, save your money and buy yourself something nice. I don't even really know how I learned how to do this stuff. I just kind of used YouTube just like you are now to figure it out. Living by yourself can be pretty expensive, especially if you don't have roommates, especially depending on where you live. So for instance, I live in Dallas, Texas, and so a one-bedroom apartment can run you anywhere from $850 on the lower side, anywhere from up to $1,300 to maybe even $1,500 a month, depending on where you are. And $1,500 maybe not even being super luxury. So I always suggest to younger people who really just want to get out of their parents' house to move in with a roommate. I always find that if you find a 2-bedroom apartment and you split the rent with another person, it's always significantly cheaper than one person having a 1-bedroom apartment. When I was ready to move out, I was about 18, 19 years old, and I just wanted to get out so bad. So I personally moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 people, which I do not suggest. Although rent was crazy cheap, I did have to live in the living room, which I don't really recommend that. Once I got a little bit older, me and my partner moved into a 2-bedroom apartment where we were able to find a roommate. So the rent for our 2-bedroom apartment was $1,095. So once we found a roommate, there was 3 of us sharing a 2-bedroom apartment, and we were able to pay $365 for rent, which is extremely affordable in the Dallas area. Quick tip off of that, if you are in a relationship with someone, or if you can rent an apartment with somebody who's in a relationship, it can make it so much cheaper because 2 people can share one room while you have your own room, or the vice versa. So 3 people are splitting rent versus 2 people. Another quick tip is to put everyone who is living in the home over 18 on the lease. This can really, really save you if somebody just decides midway through the year that they don't want to live there anymore and they just leave. If they're not on the lease, there's nothing you can do about it, and you could be stuck paying the full rent and no longer splitting it with the roommate, which could put you in a position where you can't afford to pay rent. You could be evicted, or even worse, when you do get evicted, you wouldn't be able to get a nicer apartment in the future. So just be wary of that. But even with all that said, if you still want to move into an apartment by yourself, here's how you can determine whether or not you can afford it. Okay, so assuming you have a job and a regular paycheck, what you need to do is pull up your bank statement for the last 2 months. I would suggest using 2 months where it was the most regular time period in your life, not where you went on vacation or someone gifted you a large amount of money. Just a regular, went to work, came home, did my regular weekend activities, etc. And if you don't know how to find your statement, usually you can just go to the website where you have your bank, and there's usually a section where you can pull up your statement, or you can physically go to your bank and ask for them to print it out for you. Okay, so once you have your statement, to the best of your abilities, you have to go through and label every single purchase that you made for the last 2 months. And I know you might be thinking, how am I supposed to remember, all the stuff that I purchased for the last 2 months? It's doable, okay? So from there, you need to categorize every single purchase. So what I usually do is fun, groceries, gas, eating out, bills, gifts, investments, tolls, savings, and subscriptions, etc. So you need to go through and categorize every single purchase and then put the categorized section in ABC order. That way you can see what you're spending on each one. So once you've done that, you need to look at every single category and determine how much money you're spending where. This can really help you figure out if you're overspending in certain areas. So like, I had a friend who was buying way too expensive of groceries. So I suggested, rather than going to like Target or Whole Foods or even Walmart, to maybe try Aldi's. Aldi's is really, really affordable when it comes to groceries, and that's where I get mine. It's really not that big of a deal. So on the contrary of that, I had another friend who was eating out way too much. They're spending all of their money on food. So I suggested that they purchase their own groceries and try cooking more meals than not. I had another friend where we realized that they were giving away too much money. They would go and hang out with their friends and they'd buy them, gifts from stores, or they'd buy them coffee, or they'd buy them food. And I basically just had to let them know, like, you've got to set boundaries to where you only spend money on yourself, because it's the way that you can afford this. So there ultimately was always going to be sacrifice no matter which route they went. And that's a really, really big part of this. Living by yourself versus living with your parents is a really big switch. You're gonna have to take responsibility and be an adult about a lot of things. Not only is it a lifestyle switch, but you're going to have to sacrifice a lot of things that you were able to do before. If you lived with your parents and your parents weren't charging you rent, you now have a much larger expense to take on living by yourself. So if you go out really often and you buy drinks for your friends, or if you always have to have the newest Jordans or whatever, sometimes you're going to have to make sacrifices to make sure that you can afford this new luxury that you want to take on. So once you've tallied up all your expenses, you need to see how much money you have left over at the end of the month. If there's enough money left over to be able to afford the apartment rent that you want to rent, then great, that's awesome, but you're still not done. So let's say you've tallied everything up and it comes down to, at the end of the month, you have $1,200 left over. And let's say that the apartment that you want costs $1,000 a month. You still have to consider utilities. So in Dallas, for one person, utilities can range anywhere from, I'd say, maybe about $100 to $200 a month. And it depends on what you use and what you have. So let's say in this instance, your utilities end up being $100. And your apartment rent, again, is still $1,000. And at the end of the month, you have $1,200 left over. I would not suggest doing this. That means that when you've paid for everything and you've paid for your rent and your utilities, you only have $100 left at the end of the month. And not at the end of the month, but to use throughout the month. That's $25 a week. So in order for you to have this apartment, you basically just have to exist in it. Never going out, never shopping, never spending anything more than what you can afford. So if this is the instance that you're in, or something very, very similar, or the numbers are kind of close, I would suggest considering a roommate or finding a less expensive apartment. Also, deciding how much money you want to have left over at the end of the month is your own preference. In the example that I just gave, you aren't able to have any money left over for savings, which puts you in a position where you're living paycheck to paycheck. So in that position, if you were to lose your job, you would basically lose everything. So I really would not suggest going that route. So in most cases, I would really suggest living with a roommate just in order to lower your expenses. But if for some reason you just cannot live with a roommate and you really need to live by yourself, I would suggest choosing an apartment in a lifestyle of spending where you have at least $600 left over a month, which is $150 a week of spending money, which gives you the opportunity to go out and splurge, have fun, maybe go to a restaurant on the weekends, and just buy things that are more for fun rather than necessity. And then it might still even give you the opportunity to save, even if it's only $100 a month. Planning something like this is super important, so that way you don't put yourself in a position where you're constantly living beyond your means. This further traps you in the rat race and makes it to where you're basically unable to escape a job or a 9 to 5 because your expenses are drowning you. And in that instance, you're working to live and living to work. Like I said in the beginning of the video, if you're in a position where you feel really trapped or depressed, or just basically in a situation where you just really outgrown with living with your parents, I really would suggest going through your finances to just basically figure out if you can afford to live by yourself. And if this video helped but you're still not able to figure out how to do it, you can actually click the link below and you can hire me to help you. As always, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and please consider liking and subscribing if it helped you at all. Anyway, have a great day, and stay out of the rat race.